Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday evening meditation. And it's good to see those of you who are with us on the streaming this evening and others of you who we are not able to see, but we know that you are joining us on the YouTube channel. So welcome to everyone joining us for the Wednesday evening spirituality practice given to us by Ricky DeFoe, and this comes to you from the Where Rivers Meet Spirituality Center here in Montevideo. This evening, Ricky will be sharing again understandings of the teachings of his elders on the four directions. Ricky will reintroduce himself, giving us again a short introduction, and then we will continue on with a presentation from Ricky with a focus on the West. And then we will have a slight change this evening. We will introduce a segment on meditating on the West. And so we would like to spend a few minutes in meditation. So we know that the four directions is meant for spiritual insight. And the notion of medicine is that it feeds the spirit. So we'd like to consider how the West is feeding our spirit. Now, I myself engage in the practice of praying the four directions each day as part of my spiritual practice. And the four directions is part of the tradition of the Native peoples of America, but it's also a tradition that is found in other societies as well. It's very excuse me, it's a very ancient tradition. And so in all of these traditions, there is prayer involved. And so we wish to introduce an element of prayer this evening. Ricky, welcome again.
Thank you, Kogiman. Akoe, Guivizans Indigo, Ojibwe Mung, Bishun and Dodam, Nagachuanong in Donchiba, Guaba Iganing in that Nongum, Apachigo, Ningidamagas, in the Negashkae, Bungi Etago, Nineta Ojibwem, Idash and the Sogi, Kabegi, Ninga Gagwe Jitun, Che Kweko Jichige Yang, Minoa Che Kweko Gagikido Yan. Ima Anishinaabe morning. In the pitain down bucks ago, in the way dance ago, Mushkazi Makak, Anishinaabe Jitwanan, Akinage go ima. Midashko, Hapegish, Ginawa, Wa Giknu Maguzi Yang, Wavini, Ginawa, Migo Gaesa, Miguch Kidaminik Kimijian Nishnabeg, Bimatazi Wino Ogizgak, Gegetesa, Akana Nindinaway Ma Ganitok, Nijia Alko, Kinoa, Geget Niji Bimatazik, Miguch be Shayego Manungum, Geget Miguchu and among Sago and Gyo Manitok, Miss Way Comic Givitak Comic. Gegetesa go Nijibimata Zigiyachi. Anamika Geginoa. So I want to welcome you all to this evening's gathering. And again, I introduce myself in Anishinaabe Moen, Ojibwe Moen, either or is our language. My name is Guizans in Ojibwe. I belong to the Lynx clan. I reside here on the French call Fond du Lac with the far end of the lake, but the Anishinaabe say Nagachuanong with the place where the current stops. And I reside here in the community of Sawyer. And I want to talk a little bit Mashkiki data visit. A little bit about the medicine wheel, Giknomage teachings. So I was just wondering, and I wanted to say again, thank you to Okogiman for his friendship through the years and for being instrumental in me being here this evening. And I wanted to say, Okogiman, did you want me to just briefly with that introduction, and then do you have a agenda, a change in agenda to follow, or?
Yes, Ricky. So our agenda will be for your presentation, the 4 directions, and I know that this evening we're on the west. And then with the prayer that you will have in your email, or a prayer that you would provide that would be focused on the west. And
Okay.
as given in the email, we can follow through in that way, in whatever way you would like. And then we will end with a minute or two with the drumming.
Okay. Yes, you know, this medicine wheel that we have, again, it's an ancient way of seeing the world, how things are through natural law and spiritual law, and how things come together in such a way that we can put on a visual of what we're talking about, and not only the directions, but each direction has, the elders say, spiritual power and physical power. And again, it's up to us to build those relationships, to establish an understanding in those directions. And just again, we wanted to review a little bit about the East, Wabanung, very briefly, the East, where we welcome new life, and the color again is yellow, representing the earth, again in the seasonal spring. And then we use the medicine of tobacco, and also that we think about physical aspects about that time through the East also. An infancy stage, a time for nurturing. We know those things about the East, and then we moved on to Jawanung, the South. We know that the color is red. The element is fire, Ishkode. And we think of the summer, again, spring for the East, summer for the South. The medicine used is cedar, Gijigandak, and we think of our mental aspects along those lines. We know things about young adulthood, teenage years, and things are moving. We start to begin to plan for adulthood through the South also. We begin to help others in that way. Now we move on to the West. Ningabianung is one way of saying the West. Another way is saying a Pingishimuk. So those two ways of saying the Western. We know that the color is black. Some will try to use different color, blue or green, depending upon who's teaching. We know about the 4 colors in the medicine wheel. The element is again is nibi, water, and we think of the fall, the autumn time in that quadrant of the Western quadrant. We always have our elders placed on that side also. The medicine we use is mushkote wush sage, and we have one of the biggest things that we know about that we have to have in balance. They're all equal, but this one seems to play havoc in today's world, is our emotional aspects. Because when we make decisions based on emotion, excuse me, oftentimes we find ourselves going in a difficult way. We know also about that the West is the doorway to the spirit world, and this is an adult stage. We begin to, we've developed a lot of confidence in ourselves. We know that of what we've done. We've experienced a lot in life. We have, we know about the investments, not only in ourselves, our family, in our community. And we're starting to realize those things. And we've created some things for not only ourselves, but we've created options. So that's, we begin to look at things in a different way. We're now living those things that we planted before, so they're taking fruit now. Our investments of the past are starting to show some rewards coming from that. As an adult, we're able to start to give back. And I think that is something to behold when we're in this stage, because there's much given to us. There's a lots of gifts. So we always say, "Mikwendanda ga minikoziang ga giknua magoziang gae." Lots have been given to us, so we have to, and we've been also taught a lot. So we've been, we have to put that into work, and it begins to show. So things in, as we move around that medicine wheel, we start to understand that the extreme, what it means to be in balance, and living in harmony, so to be with one another in a good way. And so those things seem to be much more important than equality in the in our worldview. So I know I've traveled to be close to the ancient medicine wheel in Wyoming, northern Wyoming, in Rocky or Powderhorn Mountains, and I got close within 3 miles, but the road was closed, and that was the second time. The first time I tried to approach there, it was, the road was closed, the mountain was closed. It was in the early, it was like now, springtime. So you got to get there in midsummer. So the medicine wheel I'm speaking about in Wyoming. So we can do those things also with the grandfather stones when we put the image where we're at, the quadrants and the importance of those. And as we're working with other people, the young people particularly, that sometimes approach us, and we're always told to find an elder or someone that's a generation older than we are, and we can bring them tobacco and gifts and begin to develop relationship with them. And as we do so, that knowledge that the elders have are given freely to the one that is showing that respect. So those things are much needed. So we're able to start to continue to have that relationship with the young people. I think they're my responsibilities. So again, we have responsibility, and as an adult, we start to utilize those gifts that are given to us, and we look for wellness, not only in ourselves, but we have to, the children see what we do, so they learn from that by watching, and they see that we're in balance in the things that we eat, the things that we talk about, how we exercise the mind, how we control our emotions, anger, love, hate, resentments and things. They see all these things as in our adulthood. So we're being watched when we're in this adult stage. Even when the hard times come to us in our families, that these young ones, they're learning from us and they're watching how we handle life's difficulties and trials and tribulations, perhaps the loss of a family member or a relative or something of that sort that brings crisis to the community. So they watch how we handle ourselves and they learn from these things. They always say that we can talk and talk, but our children learn. So there's much responsibility, and we know that in the adult stage we have that here. So we try to carry yourself in a good way. We've got to recognize those folks that have helped us along the way, and we certainly are grateful for those ones that have influenced our life, particularly our great-grandparents, our grandparents, and our parents, and all the ones that the relatives and the friends. So we have a lot to think about and a lot to be grateful for. They say if we can't find something to be grateful for, the fault lies within. So we've got to, on a daily basis, think about being in balance. And so I just wanted to share those pieces there with you here this evening, and would welcome questions and dialogue. And I think that would be more fruitful for our discussion and learning, to be question and answer and also in dialogue. So that was briefly what I had to say so far. Kogiman?
Yes, thank you, Ricky. So we welcome your questions of Ricky, especially as it pertains to the West. So Ricky has shared with us the meanings, experiences that the West brings to him. And so questions that we might have of Ricky in regard to the significance of the West, or the ways in which you find the West operating in your life. So right now, we are at about 7:20-ish, just before 7:20, and we are actually in the period of the West. The time of the West in terms of the day, from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., that is the period of the ancestors, and that is the North. And then from 6 a.m. to 12 noon, that's the period of the East, and that's the period of the rising sun, the morning. And Ricky spoke about that. And then from 12 noon to 6 p.m., that is the period of the growing day and maturity and the hotness of the sun. And that is very much the consciousness hours of the day. And then from 6 p.m. to 12 p.m., that is the period of the West. And so we are in the period of the West. We are in the period of growing darkness. And for me, this has been a very important period. And so I welcome your thoughts in regard to what this period of the West has meant for you, or you're asking Ricky questions on the meaning that the period of West, maybe experiences of the West. So again, the West is a period of the day in which we reach in, we close in, we are in the period of the day in which everything is coming together. It's this autumn period. It's this period of the extreme heat is over with. The deep coldness is not here. And we're in this middle period. Everything is calming down. We're going inside of ourselves, but we're still in the conscious realm of going inside of ourselves. And so, what does this period mean for you? Maybe sharing that and then raising questions, considerations with Ricky. Anyone who'd like to share on that?
Yeah, I have a question for Ricky. I was reading not too long ago, Black Elk Speaks, and Black Elk speaks of the West as related to the thunder beings, where the thunder beings live to send us rain. And I was wondering if you could say anything about that element, the thunder beings.
Aha. Nuitaj mag bangigego sa sa ogimagenil animaki ka ke aningabe no wasaete. So I want to talk a little bit about the thunderbird in the West. We know that the eagle, it brings omajidunan, carries our prayers to the great mystery, will carry so far out of sight. And then the thunderbird takes over and will continue to bring that to the great mystery, those thoughts, those prayers, in a spiritual fashion. We see the physical and the spiritual there. The physical, the eagle, Migasi, and the spiritual, the Ogimaginu, Animaki Ka, Benesi, the thunder, the thunderbird. So we know that the clouds, Anakwadun, bring from the west those rains. Give me one. Well, give me one. So they're to come from that direction. So we know that we have to be soon. We will go. And now that it's spring, we have to acknowledge those thunder beings also. When they come and they sound out themselves that they're here, we offer that tobacco to them and acknowledge their arrival. And ceremony is done in that fashion. In this particular one, we go to the far side there, and from spring to fall, and that's the West. And Black Elk Speaks, that is Lakota worldview. Lakota are a beautiful people, a strong people. And each tribe, each peoples, each nations have teachings that are significant to them. So I do not want to say too much about what was in Black Elk Speaks and the West from a Lakota view. I do have Lakota friends that share a way of life and being with in relationship to one another, and Dakota friends and Nakota friends. So, but again, they have their teachings that are unique and special, and so do the Ojibwe believe. In this fashion, to be in balance physically and spiritually. So those thunder beings are present, and we acknowledge their existence, and we that's where they're coming from, the West. So I just wanted to leave it at that. If I'm hoping that's satisfactory to the question that Blake posed, the significance and the distinction between Lakota and Ojibwe. Indigenous peoples believe again in natural law. And we know that natural law, the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west. And so we know about those things, the day, the night, the wind, the clouds, the fire, all of these things that are natural. The animals, their travels, their migrations is natural. And it is natural for us to understand the significance of the West and the powers to be in the moments they come. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Ricky. Other questions? Nicholas?
Hi, Ricky.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you again that you're here this evening. I'm very grateful. Ricky, a question I have is, in the West, in Christianity, there's a tradition of orienting churches towards the East. That's a lost tradition, but it's true of many of the old churches. And I've been part of different ceremonies where sometimes the lodge door is facing the east, or sometimes the west, or different tribes may have different orientations. But can you speak to, is there an orientation that's preferable to pray towards, or is there an orientation that is maybe useful in our own lives? Does the West have some of that orientation that helps maybe our own prayer life, but also maybe our practical life in some way?
Let me say this. The directions of openings, we know people look to the east, even when the afterlife, when one is buried, some will have their loved ones facing to the east because of protocol in the cemetery, perhaps. And there is also some in the indigenous way, to be, in the old days, to be sitting up facing the west. So, because that's in our worldview, there is a trail that goes from the east to the west, the direction of the west, again, the doorway to the spirit world. So it is, life goes that direction. And so in the morning, even the nation such as Dene, the Navajo Nation, speaks about their lodges open to the east. We have two types of lodges. The Eagle Lodge will open to the east, and I believe the Bear Lodge sometimes opens to the west in Ojibwe fashion, worldview. Lakota, Dakota ways that I know of, the lodges faced to the door opening to the west. Even these teachings, we can travel to these places, these centers of the medicine wheel, whether the opening is to the west or the east. We know that we're at the center. So I think that's the real important piece to know. And the conductor of the ceremony will let you know the significance of the door to the east or to the west. Tradition and legend will tell us that there is migration from the east. So it is with the Dene people, but coming from the east to the west. So we migrated from the east coming this way. And there's no place in our oral history that says that we've come across that Bering Strait that many in mainstream will talk about. So we don't have those oral histories about that. Maybe some other peoples have, but we haven't. So our language says Anishinaabe, and we've been told that it's the lowering of the male here. So we were put here. So, and we went to come from the east, coming to the west. So we entered the Sweat Lodge from the east, and we engaged in that fashion. So it is with the different tribes, the difference in that worldview. Even in when we have our wakes and funerals, that the fire will be, an opening will be on the east, and we'll come in and greet the spirit fire and offer our offerings to that spirit fire. And then we'll go around it and enter on the east and come back out on the east. Other nations might do some things a little bit differently, but I'm speaking from the Ojibwe way that I know a little bit about.
Ricky, I also heard in Nicholas's question aspects of, let's say, the power or differences in the directions. And if I may respond and with your saying whether or not this is correct, and this would be a way to engage the conversation. My understanding would be, and again, Ricky, I ask you to make sure that you have said what is right and what is not correct according to tradition. But each place in the four directions has its unique power and is not more powerful than any other direction. That it is a particular place of power. And so when I pray in the east at that, let's say the morning, and I do a prayer towards the spirits of the east, and I recall the birds of the air, maybe the eagle, and the power of the eagle. And then later on in the afternoon, if maybe I would do this all in one sitting, or maybe I would follow this at different points of the day. And so in the morning at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, I might pray let's say at noon. At noon, I might pray a prayer in which I'm dealing with the passions of life. I'm dealing with the heat of life, the struggles of life. And that's no less powerful then so it's that prayer in the south is distinct to the south. The energies of the south, the soft-hoofed animals of the south, whether it's the turtle or the wolf. And then when I go to the west and I'm in the presence of the maybe the bear or the fish in the sea, and the prayers that I say there are specific to the energies of the west and no less powerful than the prayers I might say in the south of the day, the heat of the day, or in the east of the day in the morning, or at 1 o'clock when I'm in conversation with my ancestors. And so then I would ask Ricky, this is my understanding in regard to what Nicholas was asking, that each prayer is distinct in its own power, and it's not more powerful a place than another.
Yes, that's correct. You're correct, Okogiman. To have balance, you've got to greet each quadrant. Some folks say that in today's society, they want to be in such a hurry. They will just say some quick things about each direction. And then someone says that then when they really sound out their prayers, it takes a long time to be respectful of those ones in those quadrants, those directions. So, you know, in the haste, we sometimes are disrespectful. So we've got to have balance and equality in a sense to those directions and those spirit beings there. Because remember, you're building relationships and you have to invest time and energies with those ones, much like we do with humans. So it is, we've got to invest that time. So, you know, I would say equal amount of time in each direction to make sure that you're respectful, because again, in today's society, we want to hurry things through, and sometimes we can be disrespectful in that hurriedness, in the haste to say our prayers, to put down offerings, to build relationship. If someone was to come in a hurried fashion and greet you and then head out, they might not be, you would look at them a little bit differently than if they took their time, came in and relaxed and such. So when weather is, you know, the east is very important. Also, the west is important. And that's balance again, and harmony is what this wheel teaches us. So that's right, Okogiman, very much so.
Other questions on the 4 directions? In my praying the 4 directions, I try to have this as a morning practice. And so oftentimes I will physically go in the house and face that direction. I will move around the house and face that direction and pray in that direction. And for example, so I'll start out in the east. And for me, right now, the east is straight ahead of me as I look out from my chair. My back is to the west and the east is front of me. And so I might walk in another area of the house or walk over a few paces and look at one of the icons that I have on the wall. And that particular icon is actually an icon of balance. And so then I enter into a few moments of meditation. And usually my prayers are prayers of thankfulness. In all of those directions, they tend to be prayers of thankfulness. So I reflect on my youth. I actually think back on my youth, the various happenings of me in youth. And I express my thankfulness for those things that were happening to me in those years of youth. And then I turn to the south, and then I have icons to the south. And I have one icon in which it was painted for me by a student in the 90s, probably about 90, no, it was probably in the 70s. Yeah, maybe about 1978. A student of mine. And it's a butterfly. And so in this butterfly that I have facing south, I think of the stages of the butterfly. And this butterfly is set up in such a way as you can see a mother figure embracing a person. And then you also see another aspect of the butterfly, like the head of the butterfly running across. And so then I think of the South as the Creator embracing me in all of the, all the parts of my life. And so this is the heat of life. This is the hotness of life. And as I reflect on the South, I think of what Albert Whitehat from the Pine Ridge Reservation in his book, Zuya, in which he's talking about life's journey, and he's speaking about these kinds of things. And he talks about this as this particular South as a point where we also reflect upon the things that we need to be forgiven for. So I've had all these passions and, all the passions of life. And then I need to also think about how those passions have inflicted some harm on others. And so then I ask for forgiveness in the South. And then as I turn to the West, and I have icons to the West, and I think about I think about compassion and mercy and forgiveness, because that's part of balance and part of harmony. And so how do I bring harmony and balance into my life? In part, I bring it into my life through compassion for myself, through compassion for others. And so that's the West. And then the area that I very much am in prayer is when I turn to the north and I think of my ancestors. I think of the elders, and I name all those elders again with thanksgiving. And from my grandmother to my father, to Marjorie Otto, to cousin Ethel, to all of those people that I have so much, I owe so much to. All my cousins, those who instructed me, my teachers, all those elders, all those people have passed. And so in each of those places, I'm expressing a gratitude and appreciation. And so for me, the four directions is very much about prayer. And it's a way of looking at all of these stages in our life and reflecting on the people in our life and just how we, and so if we bring it into the parts of the day, if we can, so for me, it's a morning exercise. But what if I were doing this like the Muslims 4 times a day? What would that look like? What would that look like? I would find that very interesting if I could make that a practice. I'm not sure that I could, but I would find it very interesting as a practice.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at things. So it has much to say about the versatility of the medicine wheel and the teachings that are within. Because when we center ourselves in such a view, we can go in any direction abstractly. But I think it's a tool to utilize not only as we get to adulthood, but also when we teach the young ones, as I try to teach my grandchildren about being in balance with these, particularly the emotions that come. Because again, those emotions have a way of doing some damage. And when we live in a very sick society, a very violent society, so emotions play a big part, as we see happening in the United States today. So we've got to be very careful with our emotions. Again, if we have so much anger and resentments and hate, and sometimes it's exacerbated by those social forces at work, even those terrorists that are stochastic terrorists that'll sound out things on the media, and then the lone wolves that are emotional, and some are emotionally challenged, will then become a lone wolf and commit some things that they will later regret. But there'll be much suffering because of that. Not only the victims, but also the victimizers and their family. So emotions, we have to be very careful with. And then when we teach our young ones about those emotions, even when they lose their first love, they think they'll have that love forever, and then things go astray. So then they have these emotions that are so in today's society, today's sick society, there is a lots of suicide happening, much so that in this gun culture that we have, that even non-native, such as the Anglo-American, white American, can think about something, this emotion, this suicide, because statistics show that the gun violence is increasing on white males, and that in fact, the homicides from gun violence are actually in a downtick, although the media will say that It's up. The latest study that I looked at showed that an uptick in suicides and a downtick of small sorts in homicides. So emotions play big parts in that. So it's a tool, an ancient tool that we can utilize to help us navigate through some life's difficult moments, or at least get an understanding of where we're at and name it. We recognize it, we identify it, and then we name it. And then we can begin to do the hard work to get us through those moments. Depression too is an emotion. They say much of our people, Ojibwe people, indigenous peoples per se, because the war is on, much of the world is on indigenous peoples and their resources and their homelands throughout our Mother Earth. So there's lots of trauma. So we find ourselves as a traumatic people. The distinction again is traumatic events happening to a people. And what goes on inside is the trauma. So that's the distinction, traumatic events and the trauma that's painful in our response to that trauma. So this medicine wheel can help us to name those things and then work through in a healthy way to have our strive is to, and our goal, our objective is to have recognition of the power of emotions. And that's from on the West there. So I wanted to share that a little bit.
Thank you, Ricky. In our last 8 minutes or so, I would like us to actually, as I mentioned earlier, to close out our evening, our practice this evening with a prayer that is focused on the West. And so Blake will put this up on the screen, and either Ricky or I can share this prayer. And so this is up on our screen now. And in the sections that you see highlighted, we would like you to actually take a very deep breath and reflect on healing and joy and awareness and serenity as you take a deep breath in and a breath out. And Ricky, would you be so kind as to read this prayer as a meditation and then give us some pause times to reflect on what is there?
You bet. Ningabe anong anamaewin mashkiki date besed. So we have from the West, a prayer of the medicine wheel. Creator, we pray in the direction of the West. Spirit keeper of the West, brown bear, be with us. Bring healing to the people we love and to ourselves. Bring into balance the physical, mental, and spiritual, so we are able to know our place on this earth, in life and in death. Heal our bodies, heal our minds, and bring light, joy, and awareness to our spirits. Spirit of harmony and balance, you bring us into the comforting stillness of the sunset and into a warm darkness. There may we find compassion as we seek to be reconciled with all of nature and with all living beings. In this stillness, may we feel your presence, enveloping and embracing us, loving us in all of the dark places of our lives, restoring us to wholeness, well-being, and balance. Quiet our business. Relieve us of stress as we breathe in quietness, peace, and well-being. May we know both rest in body and in mind.
May it be so. Ricky, might we end today's session with a drum prayer meditation?
Minuadas niwi nagamo nagam basic nagamonan misweni mashin manito education kuizensin de go Ojibwe mong tote. Anishinaabe, way-ya, way-ya. Way-ya, 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 way. Way, way-ya, way-ya, way. Beat again, make us your money, though. Beat again, make us your money, Good job, Chigo.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being with us for Where Rivers Meet Spirituality Center. And we look forward to our gathering again next Wednesday again at 7 p.m. And Ricky will focus on the spirituality of the North, the place of the ancestors, the place of the elders. So Ricky, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And thank you, Blake, for your assistance in managing our Zoom meeting. Thank you and good night.
Night.
Thank you, Zal. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, Okagiman.